Welcome to another episode of the Radical Hospitality Podcast. I'm your host, Zeke Freeman. Today, we've got a real special treat, a good friend of mine, Carl Runk. He is a visionary real estate developer, founder of Monarch Development Partners. They are known for transforming urban landscapes through bold and innovative projects. With over 2 decades of experience, he's played a really pivotal role in reshaping Minneapolis, city planning from financing structures and architectural challenges. Before launching Monarch, he led transformative projects at Ryan Company, including the Mayo Clinic Square and 11 luxury condo project. Carl and I go way back. We were in the same graduating class from CU Denver in their Master of Architecture program. Where at the time we were kind of the two odd ones that would go over to the dark side of the campus and take real estate development courses. Carl has really taken that to another level in his career. Even then, his visioning for blending architecture and development was always part of our early conversations. And it's been really cool to kind of watch his career develop and what he's been able to accomplish. At Monarch, Carl continues to push the boundaries with projects that emphasize revitalization and sustainability, community integration. His latest work includes Marshall Street, Northeast Apartments, One West Drive and Elixir, and the downtown redevelopment in Victoria. With a talent for really assembling world-class teams and solving complex development challenges, Carl's become one of the nation's, I would say, top architects turned developers that I know. Today, we're going to explore his journey, some key insights in large-scale projects, and lessons for other architects looking to step into development. Carl, welcome.
Thanks, Zeke, for inviting me. It's a pleasure. Having known you and Amy for 20 years now, and being at this state of our lives, and I'm very happy that we've stayed in touch over these years.
I had too. I'm grateful for your friendship, man. Well, let's hop into it. Transitioning from architect to developer, Carl, we both started in the same graduating class at CU Denver, getting our masters. Early on, you moved into focusing on the development side of the business, the dark side. What was that turning point for you, and what advice would you give to other architects that are looking to follow similar paths?
Well, I just to go backwards from CU Denver, I grew up on a farm in rural Minnesota, southwestern Minnesota, in a town called Fairfax. That was population 1,200, and my parents were self-employed business people, and all their friends were, and all their acquaintances were, and I always had a strong, independent, entrepreneurial bent to me. And after going through architecture school at the University of Minnesota and then CU Denver for grad school, I just always had an inclination to be more of a generalist and oversee the entire process of development, which I didn't know really what it was until you and I took those classes taught by Dan Stramiello, who was the adjunct professor at the time, a real estate developer, teaching classes at CU Denver to people like us in architecture and planning and other majors that were similar. And that sparked an interest in me, saying this is really what I feel compelled to do, more than just architecture. I wanted to really be kind of the generalist on the entire project, the acquiring the land, working with cities, assembling the teams, financing, sales, and marketing. It just all spoke to me in terms of that process of what developers actually do. And it demystified what they do. And Dan himself became a mentor of mine early on then, and encouraged me to find a way into development, which I did back in the Twin Cities here, where I'm from, and my wife is from Wisconsin. So we wanted to stay in the mountains in Denver, but it was trying to pull family back here to come back to the Twin Cities at that time.
Well, it's a good thing you did. You've been able to do a lot of cool things out there. Dan was a pretty incredible teacher, insightful to what you could do creatively in development. And it's been fun to see that play out with your work. When you approach projects like 11 Tower, Elixir, Victoria, how are you integrating some of the things that you were taught in architecture background? And what does that look like as you've leaned into the development side?
I think that I'm unique among developers. Of course, it's never a one-person show. There's so many people involved that you have to assemble the right teams. And I had a lot of great mentors along the way. Since I left Colorado to come back to Minneapolis, I had great real estate developer mentors that took a chance on me early on at a small developer companies, leading up to Ryan Companies as the largest developer in Minnesota, one of the largest in the country, taking a chance on me in 2014, and I stayed there for 8 years. And so that my approach has always been learning from everyone around me and soaking it up in terms of learning about each project individually, in terms of where there's an opportunity in a sub-market for whether it's multifamily housing or condominiums or retail, other projects I've been involved with, where it's really, really being sensitive to what the market needs are in a location, what the tailwinds and headwinds are for capital inflows and outflows, and what a community is looking for at a certain site. Because city councils are very strong, I would say, in some communities in Minnesota here. And we have to work really closely with them and the planning commissioners and staff to really, create a vision that we pull off that's successful for the market as well as for the community in the end. So I've really been proud about my track record, on behalf of Ryan companies and previous employers, now on my own for the last 2.5 years, of working closely with cities and closely with communities to create projects that are very successful for the investors and the communities involved.
Let's take a look at some of these. If you don't mind pulling up your screen, and maybe we can dive into a couple of these individually and, talk about some of the stories behind them and how they got put together. Let's start with this one. I think this is a great one. 11, which was my understanding, one of the tallest towers. And I remember you telling me about this when I was working on, some small residential projects, and you're talking to me about you're going to do a high-rise tower in Minneapolis, and I thought you were a bit nuts. And I honestly didn't know if you're going to be able to pull this off. And we're looking at it today, one of the, the biggest projects in Minneapolis. So walk us through how you got, this done, obviously with Ryan Company as a big backing to make that happen. But, you were a relatively new developer, within them pushing a project. How did that come about?
I had done up until this point. So we really started this idea in 2018 and it completed in 2022. Was Ryan Companies had developed if you see in the bottom of the 11 tower, there's a little 4-story office building that they developed 20 years before that with a large parking lot right on the river. And Minneapolis has continued to add residential density. So all these buildings you see next to 11 were built within the last 20 years, and including the Guthrie Theater, which is world renowned, is the blue building right in the foreground there as well. And so what we were seeing at the time was I had, previous to this point, done a lot of multifamily housing that were successful in downtown Minneapolis. And condominiums I was interested in because of being involved with the downtown council. I was on their board and helped co-lead an effort to amend the state statute regarding condo warranty defects. Because like a lot of states like Colorado and around the country, a lot of developers were hesitant to do condos. But I was able to successfully co-lead a coalition of people in our industry with bipartisan approval in 2017 to amend the state statute here in Minnesota to make it better conditions in terms of liability to take on condominium development. So that set the stage for this one. In addition to Ryan Companies owning the land, we held the land with an investment group for that little office building. And I was able to work with a local high net worth individual that purchased the office building. And then we formed a new joint venture between himself and Ryan Companies to develop the 11 tower. And something that was really key to this was bringing in world-class design, which was part of us selling a tower at the highest prices ever achieved in Minneapolis. And so we brought in Robert A.M. Stern, and Robert A.M. Stern had never done a tower in Minneapolis, and he just had finished a tower in Chicago called One Bennett Park. And Mike Ryan of Ryan Companies had worked for Robert A.M. Stern Architects at one point. So there was a relationship there to bring in Robert A.M. Stern and the quality of what they've done around the world, and especially New York, that we brought here. And so this project from the beginning had the tailwinds of Minneapolis demand for living at the time and high-end condos. There were a lot of people that were empty nesters moving from the suburbs into downtown in this location. And this took it to a whole other level where the buildings right around this site would usually top out at $1 million a unit. We started at $1 million a unit. And the per square foot sale prices, instead of the averages in the area, were $400 to $500 a square foot. We were $950 a square foot. So it was a bold and risky project in that way. But we were able to secure purchase agreements before we broke ground after the entitlements. And we had half the building sold out before we broke ground. And we received one of the largest construction loans in Minnesota history in our residential project and started construction. And then 2020 hit. And the aftermath of that, Minneapolis and COVID. And thankfully, all the buyers who'd signed on stuck with us when we were building in 2022. And we continue to sell it out. And at this point, only a few units at the very top of the building haven't sold. The vast majority of units have sold here. So this project, in terms of its meaningfulness to downtown community and level of quality, really speaks to the market absorbing the top building in Minneapolis is what this has become. And something we really had to do as developers is pay close attention to the sensitivities of Minneapolis buyers. And that included, for example, putting in features like the kitchens in the living rooms where people in Minnesota want to entertain with their kitchens and living rooms facing each other, not separate like you find in New York towers that Robert E. Stern has designed. So there's a lot of things like that. In addition, then adding even a small feature like a splash pad for kids and grandkids out on the pool terrace that's out here to the right of what you see here. There's a small splash pad. So there's a lot of little things that we were able to catch that people in the market here really desired that we put into the design so it'd be a successful sellout of the project.
Amy and I we're getting ready to do our 25th anniversary, and we're planning this trip to Spain. And we want to make it out to Bilbao, which, has Frank Gehry's kind of famous Guggenheim Museum. And they talk about the Bilbao effect, doing amazing architecture, having the ability to transform regions and cities. With a project like this, have you seen that effect around the community and in that region, drawing in other development? And what is the effect of doing a project this size, scale, quality in this part of town?
I think 11 has certainly brought a new level to condominium towers in Minneapolis. And right at the same time that we had announced this project, another developer had announced the Four Seasons, which is in this picture here. It's over a glass tower by the river that opened up around a similar time. So Minneapolis, up to that point, never had a Four Seasons, never had a 5-star hotel and condominiums. And so between this project and Four Seasons, it's really brought down to Minneapolis on a national level with other peer cities of its size. In that case, in terms of the level of luxury and quality, and these projects in the downtown core. And in addition to that, there's a lot of top-rated restaurants that have been opening in the last 10, 15 years downtown. That really have set a new bar as well. So, and when large employers are recruiting people from around the country to live in Minneapolis, that certainly helps, having all the professional sports teams, but also having a thriving downtown with high-end options here for places to live and be entertained.
You talked about having to amend some of the condominium legislation. Obviously, we have the same kind of legal issues in Colorado, where it is very difficult to get contractors and developers to do condos now because there's such a high risk of lawsuits. One, what did you guys push forward to help solve some of those legal issues? And two, why is it important for cities to be able to do condos versus other housing types?
Well, I think it's the last question you had. It really has to do with the balancing of housing supply. Because it's favored rental product for so long now that a lot of city leaders that we met in Minnesota were just worried that the future of Minnesota is going to look more like California, where it's over 50% of the population lives in rental housing, not housing. And Minnesota has been a leader in owner-occupied housing historically. And so that really helped our legislation get pushed through, was that we're trying to balance the type of housing supply being added. So it's not just rentals, which favor developers because it's less toxic or has been less toxic. But the specifics of the legislation that we amended had to do with, we brought in a lot of developers and contractors and architects who were sued in the last run-up of condos that happened between 2000 and 2010. And we created legislation based on things that would help. And one of the major things that was amended with the state statute was requiring a maintenance plan, that whenever a condominium building is built and delivered in Minnesota now, you have to file a maintenance plan to caulk the exterior and just keep it up over the whole period of the warranty of 10 years. And you have to follow that maintenance plan. Where in the past, there was no requirement that an HOA, when they take over, could just let the building rot for 10 years and not maintain it. And they would typically win in a claim against the developer and contractor and architect who designed and built the project. So that's a big win that we have the state statute. And there were 3 other changes as well that have more to do with requiring, if there's, in this building, 11 has 120 units, that 61 of the units have to vote to go after the developer for claims. Instead of in the past, it was, if you have a board of 5 people, you need 3 of the 5 board members to go after on a claim for a warranty issue. And then another item was requiring arbitration instead of going right to a lawsuit. Where in the past in Minnesota, a litigator would then issue a letter at some point that would just go right to a lawsuit, and there would never be kind of a settlement or an opportunity to work it out. And so that's another thing that was changed with our legislation here is requiring arbitration as the first means to settle a dispute.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's, again, like we want to take care of the people that are living in our buildings, and we want buildings to, provide safe housing. But they are, exposed to elements. They require maintenance. And it's complex when you have multiple ownerships. And so, I think those things you put into effect, help create a situation where it's more likely to divert litigation and solve the issue at hand. How do we get you to come to Colorado and fix ours?
Yeah, I don't know if I have another one of those in me. It took it was a great time that we did it in terms of having someone at the House of Representatives that carried the bill was Republican, which was controlled by Republicans at the time, and then we had a Democrat chief author in the Senate, which was the majority at the time. So we were able to get bipartisan support at that time, and it was supported by local mayors throughout Minnesota. So it took the right time and the right message and the right team of people that we assembled to voluntarily carry that through. But it certainly helped. It's not like it's unlocked lots of condominium development, but there has been some since that legislation was approved.
Yeah. I've heard you say having the right team a couple of times. And, I know, you're kind of known for bringing in, high-end quality architects, good team members, collaborations between cities. How important is building a good team to get quality developments done? And who are the team members that you really need to do these types of projects?
The next one, if you see it on here, is the Mayo Clinic Square project I did before the 11th Tower. This was 2012 through 15. I worked on in downtown Minneapolis. And just the whole theme of teams is so important. It's everything in development. And I think every project, I believe, has the right fit people at the right time that you can find. And whether it's the architects, the interior designers that you choose, the brokers, if it's you're leasing space or you're selling space, the financial partners you have at the time, the tenants, everything I think there's a right team at the right time, and having a knack for that is something I think I just have. I've not always been successful in that, but I think I have an eye for who might be the right fit at the right site at the right time to be in these different key roles that you're working on to create a project that gets done and actually is successful. This project I wanted to bring up as something that was transformational for downtown Minneapolis at the time. That this was prior to this becoming Mayo Clinic Square. This was a floundering vertical mall in downtown Minneapolis called Block E that was anchored by this. And this image used to have Hooters, the restaurant on the second floor, and an AMC theater and an Applebee's, and it had a lot of suburban chain restaurants. And it went into foreclosure in 2010. And right at the time it went into foreclosure, there was 800 police calls a day to this site. It was really a problem for the entire city. And the company I was with was bold in that we purchased it in distress and put together a development plan that came together. And what came together was anchored by the Minnesota Timberwolves, where we emptied out the movie theaters, AMC theaters left. And these movie theaters became practice basketball courts and a headquarters for the Minnesota Timberwolves and Lynx organizations that anchored the ability for us to do this entire project. We're with them on the third floor, and then us carving out the shopping mall to make it into office spaces, primarily with some retail. So Jack Link's, the snack company, moved in there for their offices, their headquarters, and there were the sports medicine clinic for Mayo Clinic. They're the ones that sponsored the Timberwolves, the entire building name. They came in here as well. And then there are a couple of restaurants at the first floor. But this one, again, it was the right team at the right time to rethink this troubled property to make it safe and thoughtful and exciting. So we, like, even all the lights you stood here, that idea came from one of the policemen downtown that patrol this area, saying you really need to light up this block better. And there's opportunities here to light up the building with this metal scrim. Because the Minnesota Timberwolves play across the street at Target Center, and the Minnesota Twins play a block away for professional baseball. So the building was designed to light up as really its own spectacle for different seasons and different sports happening around here.
Yeah, I love how you're taking a problem and you're creating, an opportunity for unique architecture. And, I think this is a great example of that. It's not just, casting light. It's, bringing in some of the colors of the Timberwolves and really making this an amenity and a feature for downtown. So let's like keep moving through. So you have done 2 large projects through Ryan, and helped redevelop a lot of the downtown. What were some of the next steps that you started working through? I guess your career here. I think we've got one more up. Maybe this is with Ryan, or before you left and started your own.
This was before Ryan. I was with a small boutique firm called Lattice in downtown Minneapolis for 5 years. So this is the project I did before leaving to go to Ryan. This was called Latitude 45. It's since changed its name with the new owner to Cortland Mill District, but this was the first of its type of luxury multifamily building at Washington Avenue in the Mill District. And there's since been a lot of new buildings like this or of scale like this built along there. But this took up a full half block in downtown Minneapolis in a new up and coming neighborhood that's really established now, the Mill District neighborhood. And it was the first project I did of concrete and moving from wood frame buildings to concrete. This was open in 2015. 318 units and really set a tone for Washington Avenue, which has since grown up a lot. Like on the left side of this picture, there's a new building that's 21 stories. It's now just opened up recently, for example. And so this is one that connected to the Skyway system in Minneapolis are known for, and was a good one before going to Ryan Companies, which I did this project then called Maverick, which is only 2 blocks from Latitude 45, which was on a site right by the Mississippi River. That I tried to really, this one is really meant to attract more and more young talent we were seeing move into Minneapolis for jobs from all parts of the United States. And it's meant to have an urban look more than other buildings have had. Even the decision of choosing to put Starbucks in the first floor, we had a proposal from Caribou, but I surveyed brokers and I surveyed leasing people, like which one would relate to people moving into Minneapolis for a job. Starbucks does, because everyone knows Starbucks more than they knew Caribou Coffee if they're moving from, let's say, the East Coast or West Coast to Minneapolis. And then how does this knit into the neighborhood scale wise into an existing parking garage? So this one sold after, long after we developed for a record high price in the whole Twin Cities per unit, $380,000 a unit. And it just straight traded again for a lower value with interest rates going up. But this is, of all the multifamily projects I've done, this has held the most value.
How are these projects being funded at this scale? Is it just the development company has a big, deep pockets? Are they raising capital and syndications? Is it REITs?
Yeah, at the time this was done, and this one was done, it was joint venture equity, and those institutional equity funds would typically partner up with large sponsors or even small sponsors. In the case of this one, it was Shorenstein. San Francisco was the primary equity in it, and this one was Kane Anderson. The REIT out of Florida was the primary equity in it. The new projects that I've been doing, since interest rates have skyrocketed in 2022, and institutional capital is not deploying capital into new developments anymore, or as much. You just don't see institutions and insurance companies are part of that group putting capital in new construction. They've been trying to acquire properties if they can now and not develop. So what is working though are syndications, like I've been farming on new projects, which I could show you here as well.
Let's look at your new projects and hop into that, and then kind of understanding this. So when it's institutional capital, I don't know how. Is this like a $50 million, $20 million project that we're looking at here?
Yeah, this one was a $40 million project, and this one was with Brubach out of Denver as my partner on it, and they are kind of a hybrid between institutional capital and private syndication capital. So they are the lead sponsors of the limited partnership, but there's over 60 people who've invested, mostly Twin Cities people, within the fund for this one to get capitalized.
Okay. So they would create a fund, capitalize it, and then are you pulling out debt on this as well?
Yes, yeah, and there's debt on these as well. So this one is, which has been more typical in recent years. This one's 65% debt with Midwest One Bank, which is out of Iowa, and the equity then is a partnership between Rubacle and myself and my co-general partner in Excelsior here, Dan Johnson. In that case, and this one, it also included a public parking garage that we built beneath this for the city of Excelsior. So that's why the total cost is was $40 million in this one, and but it's the first one I've done on my own after leaving Ryan Companies voluntarily in 2022 that just opened up. So this project just finished and opened up. This project, One West Drive, was my first project on my own since leaving Ryan Companies. And I was, myself and my co-developer were selected in a competitive process to redevelop the city hall and public parking lot in downtown Excelsior. So this historic town sits right on the south side of Lake Minnetonka, very desirable area, very high-end area. And this has historic zoning all around it. And so we had to be very sensitive to creating a design here that was sensitive to scale and context, and also solved an additional need for public parking here. So I brought on this one, a very well-known Minnesota modern architect named Julie Snow, because the city council here favored more modern architecture than traditional. And that helped us, get selected, bringing someone of Julie's caliber on the project team. Again, choosing the right team at the right time in the right place. She was the right designer for this. And we created this with the idea of, instead of it being a conventional luxury multifamily building that's more efficient, we went less efficient with 7 buildings here to break down the scale. And then the benefit of that is having corner units or 3 sides of units in all these apartments. And there's 38 apartments and 11 row homes. And the row homes create the separation as well, from single family homes to the apartments here.
And so this was a competition that the city put up. And so does this end up being a public-private partnership? Are they putting in land into it, or what was?
We had purchased the land for $2 million, and then the city actually used the TIF off the project, tax increment financing, to use that on our land price to pay for the garage. The garage was $9 million, and we incorporated that into the project and built it with the project. So the city is a partner with us in that way, that they funded the public parking garage that's part of this project. And that the taxes coming off this now, when it's complete, will go to fund those bond payments the city's making for that parking garage.
And then the parking garage goes back to the city, or do you guys maintain that?
The city owns the garage. We are maintaining it with an agreement with our apartment manager, which is Bader Management out of the Twin Cities, is managing the public garage as well right now.
So to put this together as part of the competition, did you have to do a concept design and performas? How far did you have to take this down to put together a deal that worked?
Yeah, we prompted this idea with the city. Dan Johnson, my development partner, is an Excelsior-based person. He lives here. He often is here. He knew the city council personally. We had reached out to them proactively and talked about development opportunities in the city, and that's what prompted this site. And we were, I think, ahead of the competition in terms of thinking this through and making it viable and a way for them to pay for public parking. They're only a town of 2,500 people. They didn't have access to $9 million to pay for a public parking garage. So that's its size. It's 2.5 levels, 250 stalls, or nearly 250 stalls. So it was putting together a plan that met all their needs. And then, because it was a publicly owned piece of land that the city hall used to sit on in the parking lot they own, they had to issue a public RFP. And so they did solicit that, and they generated 6 responses from other developers around the Twin Cities. We were selected. And I think they liked our vision. They liked the architect we chose, and they liked the low scale and low density. It's a historic, cherished place, this village of Excelsior, and we chose to do something that did not maximize returns. It makes a return that works for all the investors involved, but it didn't maximize every piece of land on the site. It purposely was low density with what we created here to be sensitive to their needs as a village.
If I'm a city, then this is a great advantage to me, because I'm able to essentially get a parking garage for free, paid through tax incremental financing. It's a component that I need. For you guys, what is the advantage of going through that effort, doing a concept design? I'm sure there's upfront costs to do that versus just going in and buying a piece of land.
I think the real advantage was barrier to entry. Excelsior hasn't had a project of any sort like this or ever, but they haven't had a new multifamily building in 50 years. It's really been a protectionist city where they want to keep Excelsior, not let it change because of the excellent historic buildings and historic homes they have. But this was really a barrier to entry story that there's just not many land sites available in the town. It's highly desirable, but there's no new product. So we saw a disconnect. And so there's been a huge pent up demand for this, but no one's been able to actually develop here, frankly, a site and to do a project of this quality. And the result is speaking for itself. You know, we had 800 names on a waiting list before we opened this. Over 28 of the 49 units are leased. We opened just a month ago. We expect this to be fully absorbed at rents above pro forma by this spring and summer once it's warmer outside and Minnesotans are back outside looking for new places to live.
This is a really creative approach to work with the city to get things done that need to happen, where cities probably don't have that development experience, but they have the needs. You know, we've been working in Morrison, developing the Red Rocks, and they have the same like parking issues. They've just been granted a piece of land in a deal exchange with the Vandermeer Speedway, but don't really have the experience on how to solve some of their problems and put some of their assets to use. What's the approach that you would take with cities that maybe have assets like land, but not the experience to start to put together projects like this that solves problems?
I think the approach starts always with conversations. So that what you see here was really born out of a conversation with the mayor, like a private conversation with the mayor 3 years ago, and one of the city council members about what they're looking for, and just listening closely to what they're looking for or not looking for, and then trying to come up with a concept that works. And also just tools. Like I have relationships in the Twin Cities about how to use tools to solve problems, and financial tools in this case, like using TIF. And the city here initially wanted to put City Hall here, a new City Hall.
Yes.
And there was a similar project where that happened, a new City Hall in Columbia Heights, which is north of Minneapolis, with a new multifamily building. And so I happen to know the attorney that did the documents in that. And so I reached out to him and I got a hold of those documents that were recorded with the city of Columbia Heights about how they financed new public parking, a new City Hall, new multifamily, and a public-private venture in that suburb. And so that helped as a precedent local in the Twin Cities we could use as a guide here to use tools to solve the problems we're looking for here. But that's, my approach with every city has been that, is getting to know their leaders and listening closely, but what they are looking for or not looking for, and trying to find creative ways to do what they want to achieve. But I also have to balance that with the market. Like, it has to be something that's financeable. It has enough yield on cost for the investors and for the lender signing out. It has to deliver to everyone taking a risk on the investment. So it has to work both ways. It can't be only something that works for the city. It has to work for the equity and debt signing on to these projects with me.
So you mentioned TIF a couple times as a tool that cities can use to do some of these projects, revitalize, add in things like parking that they need. Well, what is TIF? How does that work? How is that a tool that a city could utilize to do some redevelopment?
Well, in the case of this project, the city hall that sat here on the left side that used to be there, and the parking lot was tax exempt. So for the last 100 years, there was no taxes being generated from that site. And so using TIF, a TIF district was formed, and in Minnesota statute, it's up to 26 years. And so 26 years of term, that the taxes that are created off this new project, which are going to exceed $300,000 a year forever after this is fully done and fully stabilized, those taxes go back then in the form of increment between what it was assessed at before at basically $0. And now it's going to be assessed at $25 million or more for just the multifamily portion. That incremental tax assessment is going to pay down the bonds that were issued with paying for the public parking garage here. So tax increment financing is as simple as the value today is this, and the value in the future is going to be that much more.
Yeah.
And we're going to capture some of that value in the form of issuing TIF. And TIF could come in the forms of paying that with a privately financed note, which I did on another project recently nearby here in Waconia, or it could be issuing bonds like the city of Excelsior did, because the city of Excelsior is using the TIF, not us as a developer. So it's different and unique in that way.
So if they're issuing a bond, who buys those bonds? And where do you get that structured?
So that there was in the case of Excelsior, an advisory firm called Baker Tilly worked closely with the city on their behalf, and they then created the bond offering that then was sold to bond buyers. And the bond buyers, in this case of Excelsior, I wasn't part of that process, but it was usually they'd be a combination of institutions and individuals that buy those bonds because they're backed by the credit of the city. They're backed in this case by the credit of the city of Excelsior.
Yeah. And there's like a marketplace, I guess, from just like treasury bonds, you put them up and you can invest into those.
That's right. Speaking of cities, this is a project that spawned, I just broke ground now 3 months ago. That's on the other side of Lake Minnetonka. If I could pivot to this one. This project is in Mound, Minnesota, which is on the other side of Lake Minnetonka from Excelsior. So Lake Minnetonka is sprawling. It's a large lake that's right west of Minneapolis. And a relationship that generated from Excelsior led to this one. So the state representative, Andrew Myers for Lake Minnetonka, was helpful on the Excelsior project in terms of getting some state grant dollars for contamination. We had well over $1 million of contamination in the soils beneath the Excelsior project, and we applied for and received state grant assistance in that, which our state representative was involved with. He introduced me to the mayor of Mound, and they were looking for a new development in their downtown that would help bring up the image of and quality of what they currently have their downtown for new housing choices. And so this site is an 8-acre site that sits on a channel off Lake Minnetonka with a marina that my co-developer on this one is a Mound-based individual I know, got a hold of this piece of land that was previously mostly vacant with a garage. And the city of Mound really supported this from the beginning in terms of luxury condominiums on Lake Minnetonka with owned boat slips. These have private boat slips. There's 12 condominiums and they have private boat slips. And the big concept here was there's a lot of empty nesters looking for maintenance-free living. They're currently living in single-family homes. Here's an option they could downsize into and live in Arizona or Florida in the winter and be here in the summer months. So each of these units are 2,000 square feet or more. There are 2 bedrooms plus a den plus 3 bathrooms. They have 2-car garages. They have 10-foot ceilings. These have a lot of the characteristics that the 11 condo tower has, but they're in a smaller boutique setting next to a walkable downtown in the suburbs. That's Mound here.
Beautiful.
But this is one that on my, since leaving Ryan, I have taken my learnings and relationships and grown into this project as another one after the Excelsior project got underway. As this one is now under construction and opening up its first phase in only 6 months. Our first building's opening up already. So.
What are the costs per units on these?
The sale prices per units are $1.5 million to $2 million each, and the comps here, the competitive set exists because Lake Minnetonka, after COVID especially, has become more valuable than ever in terms of lakefront property. On the other side, on the east side of Lake Minnetonka, most homes now trade for $4 to $5 million for single family homes. And then in Mound itself, there's a 20-year-old building called Lost Lake Villas, where the average villa is selling for $1 to $1.3 million. So that was our comp to do these. That this is new construction, not 20 years old, has the highest standards, comes with a boat slip. That we believe that we could set these at $1.5 million, starting with options above that. So.
I mean, honestly, that doesn't sound bad at all. Like, I don't know where else in the country you get something at this luxury and have your own private boat slip on it. That's amazing.
Yeah, we're hope the market agrees with what you've said there.
Yeah.
And the buying season starts now in Minnesota after the Super Bowl, usually at early spring here. So we're just now taking reservations. We're going to build the first building on the left on spec. And in here we have a high net worth family office behind us as our equity, and our debt is a small bank from northern Minnesota with us on this. So we have the gift, I'll call it a gift, of building the first 4 units on spec without having pre-sales, and we can make adjustments on building 2 and 3, the middle and right side, based on what we learned from buyers on the first building. But we do believe we have the right floor plans and offerings for the first building to be successful, but we can always make adjustments at buildings 2 and 3.
Yeah. So you're permitting the whole project and then you're going to phase the construction?
That's right. The whole project's approved by the city of Mound, but we decided to break it into 3 buildings. And there's a lot of reasons for doing that. Part of it is just equity and debt needs were less with the first building, but also pre-sales. We're not having to generate pre-sales starting small, just 4 units, and having the ability to adapt to make adjustments in buildings 2 or 3. It can do that. Whereas the 11 condo tower you saw was 42 stories. It's hard to make adjustments after you start a vertical tower like that.
Yeah. And so the funding on this one is more traditional. Did you guys do any creativity like with tips or anything like that on this?
There's no TIF on this one. And this one didn't, the public benefit here was really enhancing the quality of and housing choices. And it didn't have the same public benefit as a new public parking garage for a busy downtown like Excelsior. And Excelsior hadn't had a new building of its type with studios, 1 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms in 50 years. So it was a public benefit. Here, it's a little bit, the public benefit message isn't quite as clear. It's more about high quality, nice looking real estate, new housing choices. And so I chose not to go for a TIF on this one for that reason, because the whole story of TIF tends to work better in Minnesota. I'm not sure what's like Colorado or elsewhere. If you have a story of public benefit that's real that you can see on these projects getting going.
Yeah, definitely more of a higher end luxury, market rate product. What are just round numbers, cost of construction? What do y'all's build for? Cost per square foot would be kind of nice to know for a project like this.
Yeah, on the Mound project, we're at we're trying to sell these at $800 to $900 a square foot, which is really high for Mound, but it's less than Wayzata. Wayzata has taken it's kind of become the Aspen of Minnesota in terms of that highest end condo prices. So we're at a discount to Wayzata the sale prices. On the construction side, all in will be in the the $500 to $600 range per square foot, all in. And on the construction side, it'll be depending on where we land on finishes, $300 to $400 a square foot. So pretty high, pretty expensive for Minnesota construction cost in this.
Yeah. That's definitely not cheap construction. I'd say that's probably what we're seeing more and more over here. What do you, when are you finishing this project up? You said this one's coming up in this summer?
This summer. Yeah. And it'll be phased where we open up the next 2 buildings in the following year, depending on sales. If sales go well and all the first 4 units sell this in 2025, we'll break ground on the next 2 buildings and complete those by the next year.
So through the ones that we've looked at here, like what are some of the lessons learned that you would not do moving forward on projects as you've gone through some of this?
Well, I would say I don't know if it refreshed your scale, is that the biggest lesson I've learned since trying to do or accomplishing projects of major scale and complexity is it's okay to do boutique. I know that your project Morrison is boutique, but has a lot of complexity with it. But I think that it just gets harder the bigger and bigger the projects are in terms of the needs for equity, the needs for debt, the risk you're taking on with absorbing it, whether it's condos or apartments, whether it's a hotel, whatever it is. That I think sometimes boutique makes more sense. And I now have the ability to do that, frankly, on my own when I couldn't at Ryan Companies, given the size of their company, had minimum requirements typically on the size and scale of a project because they had in-house construction and in-house architects and engineers working on these projects with us. So I think that's a big lesson. In addition to just being conservative on your projections regarding sellout or lease up rates, that there is a market in some projects, no matter where you are in the country, for very large units or very high-end units if it's residential, but it's only so deep. And I think being cautious on that to develop products that is affordable to more people is just a better idea in my own learnings, not to get too aggressive. That if you have a market study that says you can have 30 units that are priced over $1 million, maybe don't do 30 units, do 15, to be more conservative on the most expensive units where they're less affordable to people. So I would say that's just a hard-learned lesson I've had, because there are things that change. Like at the 11 tower in 2018 and 19, we were designing the building. Minneapolis was on such a good run. We didn't think it would ever stop. But in 2020, of course, the world changed when the George Floyd episode happened and all the aftermath of that, Minneapolis, and COVID happened, and people weren't working in downtown Minneapolis for a long time because of COVID. It affected the market, and that's out of our control. We didn't predict that. And so I think if we would have been more conservative on some of the projections at the very top of the building, we would have changed the design perhaps. So that's a hard lesson I learned that I'm applying to all my projects now on my own is doing things the way we know the market can absorb, and that there's a biggest possible audience to buy your product or lease your product, whatever that is.
Yeah. Speaking of market, like how do you feel with some of Donald Trump's new policies with tariffs and immigration laws? Are you concerned at all with those affecting construction cost?
Yes. Yeah. I haven't, right now I'm I started construction on another project in downtown Waconia near Excelsior here. That's 92 units. And it's a real threat that we're just now buying lumber. We're buying millions of dollars of lumber that could have an impact here because it comes from Canada a lot of times.
Yes.
Steel and other materials coming from Mexico or China. And this isn't a political podcast, but I think that there's certainly it's ill thought, and it's people that are both right leaning and left leaning. It's ill thought on the tariffs of what Trump is doing. From my perspective, and I would say the same in immigration. That immigration like when you look at skilled labor, people come into that are the most talented people in the world. They should be able to come here and work. It's always been my opinion. And if they are a criminal, they shouldn't be here. I agree with that. But like when it comes to our industry, top talent coming to Minneapolis or coming to Denver, that helps the economies grow. It helps everyone in our industry in the end. So.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, that gets put in place. I mean, we have always been a nation of immigrants. And so I don't think that's, hopefully the intent. Hopefully this gets, eased in, that we can get good labor, good quality talent, and great minds to come. What do you see as opportunities in 2025 and moving forward that you're excited about?
For 2025, for me, something I'm very excited about, I've shared with you is, I just talked about boutique scale being a good thing sometimes. And, but I also have a large project to be taken on here with boutique size buildings that are phased. It's not one big building. And so this is a master development I was just selected for by the city of Victoria. And Victoria is nearby Excelsior. It's an affluent suburban community on the southwest side of Minneapolis that has an existing downtown. And it has a lot of farmland quickly turning into homes, neighborhoods, and their population is already 12,000, is expected to double in the next 20 years. And one of the things a lot of people that move into the community like is they have an existing 5-6 block downtown that has great restaurants and bars and a brewery and trails and access to nature. This is a 10-acre development right next to their downtown. It's currently vacant land that's rolling hills with lakes around it. And the city selected me and my team in a competitive process against other developers to be the master developer with them for this vision. And we are just now getting the vision going, but it starts with how could we build a modern day main street that could absorb some retail, new restaurants and shops that don't exist in Victoria. So that's what you see in the southeast side of this project is a little new main street, and then civic space that's activated, with restaurant spaces surrounding a little park space, a little park that would be programmed for activities for families that live in this area as a kind of a cornerstone to this entire master plan. And then it's different housing types. That the types of housing that are really needed in Victoria right now are empty nester oriented with detached and attached villas. You see on the northeast side facing the park, there's a 2,000-acre park reserve right next to this. Row houses, and then big homes we're also showing, which would be essentially stately looking buildings that have 4 to 6 condo units per building. And then we've, in the future, have phased, you see on the left side, condo to multifamily buildings here as well. So this is, when it's totally built out, probably $150 to $200 million. We're just putting together budgets right now. And we're working closely with the city of Victoria on how to pay for all the infrastructure because we have to build these streets. We have to build the sewers, the street lights, the landscaping, stormwater has to all be funded. So I have assembled a special team for this project that has a lot of experience and expertise at that to help carry out a vision here that's really expanding a downtown people like into a much bigger downtown that's walkable for people to live here and dine here and shop here.
Yeah, pretty amazing. If I'm a city, what did the process look like for you guys to come up with what would be the key needs and desires of the market to put in place here? What kind of research and back of house, and what did the RFP process look like to go through this?
Well, the city issued part of this was like Excelsior's my own intuition. I met with the mayor of Victoria 2 years ago and suggested to her that there's a real need for, walkable row homes and villas in your downtown because your downtown people love it there in terms of going to the restaurants they have. And she liked that idea, and they had been thinking about ideas for 15 years what to do with this land. And that came to a head in terms of an RFP process last September, just 5 months ago. And I put together a proposal that I knew would resonate with her, the current mayor and the council members in terms of what they're looking for. And what they're looking for is what I think the broader voters want in Victoria is small density. They don't want big box buildings here. They don't want a Costco. There's a Costco that was built nearby, but they don't want a big box store here at this site. They don't want a big apartment building here. They wanted smaller buildings that feel like small town character. They wanted more traditional architecture in their community. They don't want modern architecture, generally speaking. So I knew what kind of precedent images and what kind of scale to show them. And I believe that's one of the reasons I was chosen. And I think I was chosen because the same family office investor behind us on my project Mound is behind us here. We're one source of capital to write equity checks for the commercial uses here and the housing uses, where that's hard for some developers to do that. Some developers have one source of capital saying, I'll put capital behind you to do a 55 plus rental building or a senior housing building or a multifamily building or an industrial building. I have a gift here in this project now of a capital source willing to be flexible in the type of product we do based on demand and building this based on as they absorb. We're going to start with 2 blocks most likely and then build more blocks as demand is there, and that we can find buyers for these and tenants for these spaces.
Are you guys going out and doing feasibility studies or doing any third party to verify demands?
Yeah, I did. We ordered and have a market study from Marquette Advisors. They're one of the well-known market advisors in the Twin Cities, and so they did a market study. And what you see in the design here captures what their market study says, that in supply and demand of Victoria right now, villas and row homes and condos are in highest demand right now. A lot of empty nesters can afford these and want to be there, and that as time goes on, more multifamily apartments will be needed. Victoria currently has 240 unit buildings under construction that are apartments right next to this site. And there's an existing 84 unit building that's been open for 5 years. So there's too many apartments in the market right now. I mean, they have to absorb over the next few years. But while those absorb, these are product types in need right now and what we need long term in terms of empty nesters and just younger people too that want a maintenance-free walkable living like this. But very high quality architecture, high quality units that we're showing here.
And then did you hire a site plan or a planner to do some of this initial layout, or is this you?
Yeah. So Confluence is seen here as the landscape architect and planner. Terry Monarch is well known in our market for doing master plans. He was actually the lead master planner, landscape architect on a very large development Ryan Companies is doing right now. That used to be a Ford Motor site in St. Paul. It's called Highland Bridge, and it's 150 acres, that master plan community. This is 10 acres, but I have the same talent, working on this with us to incorporate the needs and uses and the topography and views we have here and connections to a 2,000-acre park sitting right next to this and lakes that are right by this. So Terry's on this. And again, this is, when you talk about teams, I think he's the right guy for this project right now, given his experiences around the Twin Cities and sensitivities to the market that we have on this. It's a similar story on the other consultants project that is in my gut. I believe are the right fit for this project at this time.
So if I'm a city or have a potential property that I think would be a good fit to work with you, like what are the type of partnerships that you're looking for right now with your company, and how do we get in touch with you, Carl?
For me, it's it has to do with what each city is looking for. And I have a personal preference for downtowns, is that I think there's a lot of people looking for walkability that don't necessarily want to live in a big city. They don't want to be in Minneapolis right now or St. Paul in our case, or in Denver. Some people want to be in suburban walkable downtowns. So I think that's there's demand for that a lot of cities would like to find developers like me or workloads like me to think about their downtowns and how could they expand on the offerings or reinvent their downtowns. Some downtowns are really underwhelming, have been neglected, have been, tenants that are marginal tenants. I think there's a lot of cities that, based on my own experiences now, that would like to do more what I bring, which is open-mindedness to doing complicated little boutique projects that are types of housing or retail or other uses that they're really looking for to enhance their downtown, to make it more viable. In the case of Excelsior, it was adding 240 public parking stalls that are downtown to help their businesses and restaurants thrive, new housing. And the other downtowns, it's the same story. I'm bringing new quality projects that are beautiful, that are lasting, that serve a function, and they bring something else usually to the table, whether it's retail or parking, to add to that mix. So I think that's what cities I'm seeing are looking for, and I think that's what the market wants too. It's both. They want to see prosperous little downtowns instead of only downtowns being in major cities. They can be in these suburban communities too.
Well, fantastic. Well, Carl, this was a real treat to get to see all the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for taking the time to share, especially for other aspiring architects, developers on the process and path to get there. Really proud of all that you've accomplished, and I appreciate your time hopping on Radical Hospitality and sharing some wisdom with us.
Yeah, I hope it was of value to some of your audience. So thank you for inviting me in. It's always good to talk to you, Zeke.
You as well, my friend.